I'm Amanda from Mariano's, and I have Sarah here. We have Belinda from Wine Wednesday here as a special guest too, so we're excited. But tonight is all about Maker's Mark. I don't know if any of you guys ever been to the Bourbon Trail and visited? Oh, I see. Yep, some Maker's Mark there. Have you guys ever been to visit? It's the most incredible place that I have ever been. And I actually went exactly a year ago. And my favorite place of all the places we visited was Maker's Mark. It is unbelievably gorgeous. We had a great time. I highly recommend once we can all start traveling and getting around. But it's not only a beautiful place, but you learn about the history and the heritage of the brand. And it's really special. So we're excited to have Matt Jannotta here again with us, who was here a few weeks ago with Hornitos. We also have an old friend of mine, Greg Butera, who's an ambassador for the brand as well. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Everyone must be 21 except for Mackenzie, because I know she's running away from the drink making. Also, be kind in your comments. We have a chat button at the bottom of the screen, so please ask questions. Greg's available, Matt's available, Sarah and I are available for any questions you might have. And we developed this place because we're all social distancing and sheltering in place. We know things are gonna get lifted soon, at least in Illinois, hopefully. We don't know about the city yet. It keeps going back and forth, but we are here for you online. So I know everybody wants to get happy hour started. So Matt, let's kick it off with a Maker's Mark Manhattan.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the intro, Amanda. And it's a pleasure to be here with you all for the second time in a row. You know, I remember the last call that we had, it was 2 weeks ago. We talked about Hornitos. I asked you guys to journey with me to Mexico on a little trip that we were going to take in our cocktail making. And today we're going to journey to Kentucky. And not only are we going to journey to Kentucky, but it's one of the best places in the United States, in my opinion, to enjoy bourbon, enjoy whiskey, and also the general atmosphere of the state is perfect for this call. So if you could take yourselves, if you've been on this, if anybody who's been on this call has been to Kentucky, put yourself in that mind state. If you haven't, think rolling hills, think good smells, think good weather, think positive things, and that's what Kentucky's all about, and that's what Maker's Mark is all about. So we're going to start off with one of my favorite cocktails called a Manhattan. Now, there's a reason why Manhattan is a classic, and that's because it is absolutely delicious, and classics stand the test of time. Whether it's literary, whether it's any type of art, music, etc. If something is classic, it always stands the test of time. And that's why we're going to make this delicious, delicious cocktail today. Now, a lot of people might have heard about Manhattans through like Mad Men, for instance, and you know, a lot of like mid 50s type of cocktail drinking, and it's still to this day still delicious. So let's start making it. Now, we're like, as I talked to you guys about a couple of weeks ago, cheapest ingredient is always going to be first. And now when I say cheapest, it doesn't mean that it's cheap in quality. It means that it's less expensive. So the least expensive ingredients first, just in case you make a mistake, you don't have to throw out the most expensive stuff and the best stuff, which in this case is Maker's Mark, absolutely. So let's start with the least expensive ingredient. And we're going to do 1 ounce of sweet vermouth, if you have it. We're going to pour it into our jigger.
And Matt, we're not adding ice yet, right? Because that's your other trick. Let's not dilute it down, right?
Absolutely. So don't add ice just yet. And the reason why is when you pour liquor over the ice, it waters things down. And you know, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, when you get a watered down, diluted cocktail, nobody likes that. You know, you want it to taste good. So we'll start out proper, and we'll just put the ingredients in the glass before the ice. Now, the second thing we're going to do is add 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. Now, there are many types of different bitters, but Angostura, in my opinion, is the perfect bitters for a Manhattan and also the part of the classic recipe. So we're going to do 2 dashes. Now, dashes can be a little bit different measurement-wise. So, like, if you have a totally full bottle, the dashes aren't going to be the same, as if you have like a quarter left in your bottle. So it's kind of like an eyeball thing. But good news is we're making cocktails, and you can't really lose. So we're gonna take two dashes.
And you know, I'm always slow, Matt. How much of the vermouth? Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The vermouth?
1 ounce of vermouth.
Okay, got it.
Yep. We got that in there. And then we're gonna take our Maker's Mark, which is the most delicious and best part of the cocktail. We're gonna do 2 ounces. Now, does everybody have those things combined in the glass? Everybody ready? Good. Now we're gonna add our ice. And in some cases, your ice might not fit, but that's okay. Take a spoon, if you have one. If you don't have a bar spoon, that's okay. As long as it's rotated and stirred. Stir it around, get a good little vibe to it. And the most important part about this is that it's going to cool down the cocktail. It's also going to dilute the cocktail in the right amount. So I would say do like maybe 15 rotations. Now take your glass. If you have a strainer, use one. If not, no big deal. Make sure that the ice doesn't fall into your glass and create a ruckus. There you go. If you have a cherry, garnish with a cherry. If not, no big deal. Just take your glass and sip and enjoy. That's a good one.
I can't get the cherry out.
How's everybody feeling about the Manhattan?
Matt, the Manhattan is always a favorite of mine. Fantastic drink.
So you just sort of put it like on top or anywhere, right? Can you put it anywhere?
There are no rules when it comes to garnishing the Manhattan. Mandy, you can lay it across the glass like that. Looks good. Plop it right in there. Put it in your mouth first. Do a little chew, then take a sip. Whatever you want. It
Here,
is
I'm
your
so happy I
world.
stole these glasses from the tasting room. Don't tell. Cheers, everyone. Here's to the perfect Manhattan. Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Oh my gosh. Okay, so here's what I want to, so sometimes, you know, if you go to restaurants, what really makes like the perfect Manhattan? Is it getting the right measurement? Is it the way I mean, I really think I did an excellent job with this. It's delicious. But is it like, what really are the factors you really have to take into account when you're making a classic cocktail like this, Matt?
Well, there's a couple different factors. One, you have to have good, high quality whiskey, first off, which we're dealing with here. Like one of the best whiskey Manhattans, period, makers. Second, you also have to have a good vermouth as well. And then third, which is also equally as important, you have to stir the proper amount of time so that the Manhattan is still cold, but it's not overly diluted.
All right, and okay, we have some questions already. Do bitters go bad?
You know, actually, this is a perfect question for my man, Greg Butera, who's on this call, and yeah, he's got the moose hands up, and not like as far as knowledge in this industry is concerned, and as far as accomplishments are concerned, this is one of the best individuals that you could possibly have on a call. And on top of that, he is the Central Region ambassador or diplomat, sorry, for the entire United States. So if there's anybody that knows about cocktails, or anybody that knows about bitters and Maker's Mark, it's going to be Greg Butera. So I'm going to kick it off to you, Greg.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. Really excited to be on the call with everybody today. Thanks for dialing in. So to answer that question immediately, bitters generally won't go bad. So it depends on the kind of bitters, though. It's sort of a nebulous catch-all category. Generally, bitters are made with high-proof alcohol as the base or the solvent. So you take high-proof alcohol, various herbs and spices, bittering agents like roots and barks. So when all that stuff is infused together, that it'll last for decades. If you have a different kind of bitter, something that's glycerin based or much lower proof, or you have some mitigating agents that could potentially go bad on you, like more botanical matter in like an unfiltered bitters, then it might be a different equation. In general, something like Angostura or another commercial product that you can buy at Mariano's is never going to go bad. So functionally, it's got an infinite shelf life.
And then also a question from Aaron. Do you keep vermouth chilled? What's the way to store vermouth?
Best way to store vermouth. So vermouth is a wine. It's a fortified aromatized wine. So to make vermouth, you take a wine base, add in various botanical agents to create your flavor profile, add a little bit of some kind of distilled spirit to get the proof up to the alcohol percentage, rather up to about 20%, and it depends on the vermouth, but you're looking between about 16% and 22%. So it's more alcoholic than most wines, but it's essentially still a wine and should be treated as such. So the best way to keep it fresh is to pump it if you have a wine vacuum sealer,
Yes.
and then store it in your refrigerator and start tasting and nosing it after 3 or 4 weeks. If I was running a cocktail bar, I'd probably dump all my vermouth at about the 2 to 3 week mark. You can keep it for a month and a half, 2 months at home before it'll start to taste off. Now, it doesn't go bad. It's not going to hurt you, but the flavor profile will just get kind of flattened out. It won't be as vibrant, as racy, won't add the same dynamic energy to your cocktail as a fresh bottle will.
I've been actually buying like smaller bottles of vermouth so that, when I was buying the bigger ones and then they were sitting in there, for more than 2 months probably. But that's a good tip about the vacuum sealer, because I do have one. I have one of those, but that's a great purchase for anyone. They're not expensive if you go onto Amazon or something to purchase that. Yeah,
$8-10 or whatever, and you can just and you can do that with your bottles of wine and other fortified wines that people tend to leave in the pantry, like sherry or marsala or whatever. Unless it's explicitly just a cooking wine, you still want to try to take the oxygen out of the bottle and keep it fresh.
I love Noel's comment about the drink, how does it taste? And it tastes like another, which I agree. It's definitely one. It's definitely great to have probably another one of these when we're done. And then Belinda has a great question. Greg, what is the description of the maker's style and how does it differ from other brands?
That's an awesome question. So Maker's Mark is a bourbon. Bourbon is, a subcategory of whiskey. So whiskey is just a distilled spirit that's made from a grain base. But you can kind of funnel it down. So if you have a bourbon, then it has to be 51% corn by volume in your mash. We use wheat as our flavor grain, or secondary grain. So we're what you would call a wheated bourbon. So I can go over like the general bourbon category in just a couple of sentences, and then I'll talk a little bit about wheated bourbon and go into the maker's story just a bit. So bourbon, like I said, has to be 51% corn, but if you want to call it a Kentucky straight bourbon, it's 70% corn as your minimum. Has to be aged in charred new oak containers. There are a lot of slight misconceptions about what constitutes a bourbon. So some people say it has to be aged for 2 years or 4 years or whatever in a charred new American oak barrel. That's not quite accurate. It just says aged in a charred new oak container for an extended period of maturation, and it leaves it to the discretion of the distiller. So you could literally dump new make distillate, if it meets all the other criteria, into a barrel, dump it out and call it bourbon. But to call it a Kentucky straight bourbon, it has to age for at least 2 years. So that's, I think that's where people get the minimum aging criterion mixed up. So bourbon, 51% corn, Kentucky straight bourbon, 70%. Bourbon just has to be aged in a new oak container. Kentucky straight bourbon, charred new oak container for a minimum of 2 years. Bourbon can be made anywhere in the US, but most of it comes from Kentucky. Maker's Mark is a Kentucky distillery. We're located in Loretto, Kentucky, which is in the central southern part of the state. So the Bourbon Trail more or less kind of runs from Louisville over here to Lexington over here, meanders a little tiny bit, but it's almost a straight line. Maker's Mark, if anybody has been there, is way down like an hour and a half from either of those cities. So it's way off the trail. You have to take these harrowing, precarious, winding roads with sheer drop-offs and distillery trucks zooming by the other way. And more than a few people have gotten car sick on our expeditions there, but it's worth it when you get. Oh yeah, Matt actually with me was feeling a little, lost his sea legs for a few minutes on the journey, but it's worth it when you get there. I think it's legitimately one of the most beautiful places on earth.
And would you also say that Maker's Mark came up with, Margie in particular, came up with the idea of bourbon tourism?
I would say that, yeah. So essentially the inception of Maker's Mark, right? We'll talk about the story of the brand a little bit. Maker's was created by a husband and wife team, Bill Samuels Sr. and his wife Margie. So Bill inherited his family distillery. I forget whether you mentioned it, Matt, but Bill was kind of the scion of the Samuels family. His great-great-grandfather started one of the first true bourbon distilleries, the T.W. Samuels and Sons distillery in 1844. Bill inherited that in 1936, was running it, into the Second World War, and then his financial partner convinced him to sell the distillery, and so he got out of the bourbon business in 1943. But he'd grown up in it. He was part of this heritage of Kentucky distillers for well over 100 years at that point. He's actually the sixth generation whiskey distiller, starting with family that he had ancestors in Scotland who emigrated over to the U.S. So Bill retired to life more or less as a country gentleman. He was about 40 years old, bought a big piece of land, called it Star Hill Farm in Bardstown, Kentucky. For about 10 years, he just kind of hung out on the front porch and hosted dinner parties and went to the races and was a gentleman of leisure. And then, after a decade or so of that, his wife Margie said, "Bill, you're still a young, energetic guy, and you're incredibly bright. What do you want to do with yourself?" And Bill said, "Well, I think I'd really love to make my perfect bourbon." He said the family's recipe was a little too harsh for his personal taste vision, his palate. Said, the family recipe was a little bit more of a bottom shelf brand, T.W. Samuels. It was, he called it a blow your ears off bourbon. It was kind of a grip it and rip it, goal oriented, product. So, and for the most part, that's what the bourbon industry was at that time. It was cheap handles of high proof, very rough and harsh whiskey that intended to get you from point A to point B, sobriety to inebriation as efficiently as possible. Bill said, why can't we develop a bourbon that changes the category? There wasn't the nomenclature we have now, craft bourbon and boutique bourbons. That wasn't even a reference point. So Bill said, there are all these upscale French brandies, right? They're cognacs and armagnacs that people sip and contemplate. They want to hold them on their palate and try to distinguish the nuances. They nose them, they take notes. So there really isn't anything like that in the American whiskey world, but maybe we can make the kind of bourbon that you can hold on your palate and really think about, and want to go back for. You don't hold your nose and get it down the hatch as quickly as possible. So that was kind of his starting point, his taste vision. He wanted to get rid of the bitterness, get rid of the harshness, create something that was rich and flavorful, but really, easy drinking. So in 1953, Bill and Margie started Maker's Mark. Bill made the whiskey. He grew up a distiller. Margie, we say, essentially did everything else. So she was the first woman ever inducted into the Bourbon Hall of Fame who worked for a distillery. She was, like Matt alluded to, kind of the original leader of bourbon tourism. Before the Bourbon Trail existed, she started creating structures and an atmosphere at Maker's Mark that invited guests to come and spend time with us and see how we did what we do. So yeah, Margie kind of built the whole marketing side of our business. She created the bottle, designed the shape of it. It was designed to resemble a French Olympic cognac still. So it was just kind of like a quality statement there. And here I got a bottle of cask strength, but just for visual reference. She designed the label. She hand tore the first several thousand labels. So if you ever notice the Maker's label, that's kind of the jagged edge. That's to represent the hand tearing that Margie did initially. she named the product. So Bill wanted to call it Star Hill Farm Bourbon, which isn't bad as these things go, but Margie said it's not catchy enough. You know, it's meaningful to us, but is it going to get the customer's attention? Yeah, we got to come up with something maybe alliterative, something that's going to pull people in. So she named the product Maker's Mark, and she designed our little SIV logo that you're probably familiar with. You can find it on the bottle if not. But that's our actual Maker's Mark, and that was inspired by fine English pewter pieces that Margie collected. So the production houses would stamp a little Maker's Mark just on the bottom of their pitcher or platter. So if you looked, you could say that comes from this, you know, very fancy pewter maker in London. So you know it's really exceptional quality. It's a collector's item. So our SIV, I don't know if you guys can see that.
Yeah, and if you guys have an opportunity, if you got a bottle of Maker's Mark with you, take it, hold it in your hands, feel the label, just tactile wise, look at it, appreciate the S4 right there is for what, Greg? Star Hill Farms, right?
Well, so the SIV is, you know, the S, Roman numeral 4, start with a circle around it, stands for Samuel's 4th generation commercial distiller. So Samuel's family and their history of commercial distilling. The star with the circle represents Star Hill Farm, which was the family estate. And then there are a couple of breaks in the circle, and this isn't something I can officially confirm, but it's just a cool little piece of the lore. There are a couple of breaks in the circle that we think represent the few times that the family had to stop distilling. So there's a little break for the American Civil War, one for World War I, one for Prohibition, and a tiny one for World War II.
And now, Greg, we also mentioned, you know, picking up that bottle and feeling that wax. It's all hand dipped, right? So.
Yep, every bottle, you know, from the beginning of our operation until the present day has been hand dipped. So it's one of those things that we could automate that at this point, but it's such an integral piece of our personality, our identity, the way we think about ourselves as a brand and the way we do business. We still hand dip every bottle. So those are all dipped in red wax in Loretto at the distillery. That's another thing that Margie came up with. Another contribution she made was the red wax dip. It's kind of become our, you know, probably our signature more than anything, and like the soul of our brand visually. Yeah, so that was another piece of her legacy. We still apply all of the paper labels by hand and print them on site. So if you ever go to Makers, you can check out the print shop. We've got 3 vintage 1930s era printing presses, and we still use them to stamp and cut all of our labels.
You know, so I personally actually didn't believe it until I had the opportunity to work at Beam Centurion and ultimately for Maker's Mark, and I saw it happen, and it's real. The labels are still hand cut, the bottles are still hand dipped. And you can find Maker's Mark in every corner of the world, and it's still all hand dipped in Loretto, which I think is pretty sweet.
It's amazing. I mean, you know, I didn't talk too much about why we do things the way we do them. We talk about our purposeful inefficiency. That's one of our little catchphrases internally. We say a lot of what we do is purposely and purposefully inefficient. It's, you know, partially it keeps us grounded, keeps us really like tethered to our identity and our history. You know, we're a heritage brand. We've been around now for, you know, going on 80 years, and it's, you know, so it's important to us to stay centered. The other thing is, I mean, we're a major employer in that region. Like I said, we're an hour and a half from Louisville. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And if you get down to Maker's Mark and actually talk to the people that work at the distillery, a lot of them, their parents and grandparents work there. Some of their families helped to start the brand in the 50s and early 60s with the Samuels. There's a sense of community investment and ownership. You know, they really feel like this is their brand. There's a spirit of community that I haven't found anywhere else. So yeah, we could automate the bottle dipping, but, you know, then we'd put a lot of people out of work. And this is, you know, Maker's Mark is not just their livelihood, but it's a huge piece of how they understand themselves and their place in the world.
Right. You know, and that's excellent points. And I think while we're thinking on those and while we're marinating on those, do you think we should make the next cocktail?
Well, we have a few.
I think that's a great idea.
Let's get to those so we don't miss them. Mike asked a few times comments about Maker's 90 proof versus say Maker's cask or Maker's 46.
Just the differences in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, Maker's 90 proof. So we mature all of our whiskey for 6 to 6.5 years on average. We don't go with an age statement. We age to taste. We've never bottled anything, with maybe very few exceptions, like the very first batch. Never bottled anything less than about 5 years and 8 months, 9 months old. That's the youngest. The oldest stuff that we end up bottling is 7 years and a few months. That's kind of our wheelhouse flavor-wise, and that holds true for our entire lineup. With original Makers, we take that 6 to 6.5 year aged bourbon, dump it out, circulate it very lightly with just a little bit of charcoal to round out some of the rough edges, and then cut it down to 90 proof. So it's that's the classic Maker's mark that everyone knows and loves. With Maker's 46, before we cut anything down, we take the heads off of the barrels. Add in 10 seared French oak staves. So it's French oak that we use an infrared heat source to sear almost like you would a medium rare steak. It gets a very dark toast level on the outsides of these staves, which are like planks of wood, like you would build a barrel on. And then a really light toast level as you work toward the center. So we add those into the barrel, recuperate, and then rest it in a temperature controlled cellar for just about 9 weeks. These are engineered to be like maximum extraction flavor bombs. So that French oak, just over the course of 9 weeks or so, is going to give you all kinds of different nuances, more rich caramel tones, a little bit of spice. Kind of takes the classic Maker's tree fruit, like ester profile that I get, almost like a green apple thing, and evolves it into more of a stone fruit, like a jammy apricot note. So yeah, we're talking about the Manhattan, and it's actually Bill Samuels Jr.'s favorite cocktail. Maybe mine too, but Bill's more important. So Bill Jr. was the son of the founders. His favorite drink is a Maker's 46 Manhattan. He does it a little different. He adds in a splash of cherry juice and no bitters. Really doesn't like the bitter side of it. But Maker's 46 is really kind of, I think it's the perfect bourbon for a Manhattan. So if you're looking to elevate what you're mixing with, along with Matt tonight, grab a bottle of 46 and try that in a Manhattan as well.
Absolutely.
Love it. Okay, so Kevin and Owen said, which I agree, because it is unbelievable. If you've never been to a tour at Maker's Mark, it's a must. I mean, I would definitely put the Bourbon Trail on your bucket list of places to travel. We honestly had the best time. We were planning to go back this year, but then, but we'll go next year for sure. Belinda has the best question. What would you pair as a bite with Maker's, with a shot of Maker's?
Oh, that's a great question. Matt, do you have anything off the top of your head? Otherwise, I'll.
What was the question?
Make the wings.
What do you recommend with a shot?
What would you pair as a bite?
Well, we got the wings recipe, guys. Remember?
Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking. Is that delicious wings recipe? And Amanda's got it going right now. Just take a bite of a wing, especially with the sauces made with Maker's Mark. Take a little shot, take a little sip. Delicious.
I would like to know, this is a great
my backup plan would be a mouthful of Ready Whip, but that's kind of how I get down.
Or some salami maybe.
Salami might be good, and that ties into the next drink you're going to make potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great segue. So if we're ready to go into the next drink.
I still have more questions, Matt. Why are you in such a hurry?
Oh, I'm not. Bring those questions on.
All right. Okay. So Ron wants to know. He's sorry that his camera's out and microphone's out. That's okay. We'll see you next time, we hope. Does anyone know where or who actually invented the Manhattan cocktail?
I do. Ooh, pick me.
All right, Greg, let us know.
So it's sort of a lie that I say I know, because nobody knows. It's one of those cocktails whose origins are lost to history. However, we know that it first shows up in print in 1884 in 2 different resources. So it shows up in a cocktail book published by a guy named O.H. Byron, and also shows up in the 2nd edition of Harry Johnson's Bartender's Manual. It seems to have been created in New York during the 1870s or early 1880s. So vermouth as an ingredient, Italian vermouth or sweet vermouth, was imported starting right around 1870, late 1860s, mostly just imported along the East Coast. Primarily Italian immigrant communities were drinking it. Through the course of the 1870s, bartenders began to explore adding vermouth to cocktails, creating different profiles. We think of, you know, the 1870s and 1880s, maybe 1890s as like an ancient time in cocktail history, where the bar experience was maybe a little more rustic or a little less elevated, and that's not the case at all. They were incredibly creative, and during the Gilded Age, especially in cities like New York and Philadelphia and Boston, really wealthy cities along the Atlantic coast, and San Francisco on the other side of the country, and Chicago as well. There were extremely upscale bars and extremely talented mixologists that were creating cocktails that would stand out in today's environment. So vermouth was this exotic new ingredient that they got a hold of. They started playing around with it. Has all these, obviously, these kind of almost cola notes, rich spice notes and vanilla and herbal dimensions. And so they started adding it to everything. The Manhattan was just a natural product of that experimentation. So it's really hard to pin down who exactly invented it. Some people say that Winston Churchill's mother, Jenny Jerome, who was an American socialite, is the inventor of it in like 1876 or something. It doesn't actually make sense timeline-wise because she was en route to England to give birth to Churchill. So there's this fable that's been handed down about how it was served at a particular society party in the 1870s. There seems to be no grounds for that. But by the early 1880s, you could have ordered a Manhattan or ordered, you know, like a whiskey vermouth cocktail and gotten something pretty close.
That's a good story. I like that about Winston Churchill's, his mom or his wife?
It was the mom, Jenny Jerome. Yeah, it's a great story, which is why it's gained some traction. Like I said, it doesn't actually add up when you dig a little deeper, but it's sort of like the story of the naming of the cocktail. There are these good stories that have been passed down, and when you dig into it, it's like actually Occam's razor leads you to a less exotic conclusion.
Catalina would like to know, Matt, what kind of vermouth are you using?
In this particular case, I'm using a Jolene sweet vermouth. However, there are a bunch of good ones out there. Carpano Antica is one of the most popular ones. I saw you had a bottle. Yeah, it's probably my favorite. But you can use pretty much anyone, but Jolene and Carpano Antica are my two favorites.
I think that I'll add in a third one, if you don't mind. I really like, especially with Maker's Mark, I really like Coqui di Torino sweet vermouth. So that's one to look out for as well.
Oh yeah, see that's what Aaron has.
There you go.
Coqui. All of them are delicious. At Mariano's, we do sell the Carpano at select stores. We also have Martini and Rossi and Gallo, but a lot of these that we're mentioning are more high end, and they're all delicious and they're all perfect for mixing with cocktails. And we also have Angostura bitters at the stores too, so you can stock up on those if you haven't had yours for 10 years. And Luxardo, Erin just held up her Luxardo cherries. We sell those at select stores. So
and for the more like mainstream vermouth brands, I think Martini and Rossi makes a really nice Manhattan. It's a good functional, all-purpose, and obviously very affordable sweet vermouth. So nothing wrong with M&R.
I agree. This is a great one. Allison wants to know, how many bottles are dipped per hour at Maker's Mark?
You know, let me think. I feel like I need to know this. Let's see. I think we generally have 4 people doing one every 6 seconds. So give me 1 sec here.
I saw the area so one other thing I'll give you some time to figure it out, Greg.
About 400 bottles per hour, I believe.
That's crazy.
No, but it would be about 4,000. Sorry, about 4,000 bottles an hour it should be.
It took me an hour to do one. I did this one. And you know what? I did such a bad job. I only had one drip.
Yeah, that's really not very good, Amanda.
I'm
not
sorry.
gonna hold back. No, it's just fine.
But I had a great time.
The thing is, because of repetitive use injuries and things like that, the people on the bottling line, they dip so fast, partially because we keep them fresh. They only do a half an hour on dipping, and then they rotate to another station. So it's it's one of those things where they get in there, crank it out for a half an hour, and then they go and work on something else.
Got it. Okay. And then Kevin and Owen have another tip, which I'm sure you guys all know from Makers, is that you can sign up to be a Makers Mark ambassador, and they can put your name on a barrel and you can purchase that barrel when they open it. We actually did an event with Makers when we were allowed to do events in the stores a few years ago. And Sarah and I never saw so many people in our lives. Like hundreds of people came to get, glassware and some of the other POS and all that kind of stuff. So that's a really good tip. Erin is also here, and we're going to spotlight her for a minute. She's going to talk about her hat, which is great, and also about something really cool that you could do as a gift and something for Father's Day, which I love. Oh, wait, hold on. We can't hear you. Wait, I don't know if you're muted or, hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm good.
There you are. Hi, Erin.
Hi, how are you?
Erin works behind the scenes to help Sarah and I plan all these, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Excited that so many people are on and asking great questions. So we do have a Maker's Mark label program. It is focused right now around Father's Day, but you can honestly do it for any holiday or any birthday that you want. So you can go on to makersmark.com, personalized label, and have a label made. So I had one made for Father's Day this year for my father-in-law. Hopefully he's not on here because he hasn't received this yet. So you can do that. Right now with COVID, it normally takes like 10 to 14 days. It took about 3 weeks for mine. So I would recommend doing it sooner than later. And then I got another one for like my husband. It was his 40th. So it says on there like his birthday and like the celebration and stuff. So
cool.
Yeah, you can personalize it however you want and put the occasion, and there's several different occasions on there. So I highly recommend logging in and creating your own personalized label. And then you can kind of just flip it off the back and put it onto a 750 ml bottle of Maker's Mark.
There's nothing better than a personalized gift, especially something like this as a spirit for graduates or as a gift like Father's Day. It's a perfect idea, Erin. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I love it. Siegel has a great tip to pair Makers with charcuterie boards, of course, because I think everything does go with cheese. I know Belinda would probably disagree, but I'll drink anything. But she also gives a great shout out that we have the best pre-made cheese boards, and we do. So we make it easy. You can just grab the cheese board and your Makers and be on your way. Kevin and Owen love Luxardo cherries. Thank you, T. Briggs, also for the shout out on the charcuterie boards. C. Seneca. So she had a bottle with red and blue wax. Don't you guys do that during election years or something?
Well, go ahead, Erin.
Oh, I think we muted her. We're on mute. Okay.
Yeah, so we have the Cubs double dip bottle available in your stores actually this month, and they do other dip called double dipped as well for different reasons. But right now we have Cubs double dip, and then they do a holiday dip sometimes as well. So you'll see.
It's cool to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, the double dip is something that we don't do quite as much anymore as we did, in the past. It's something that we're trying to reserve for really special occasions. So if say the Cubs won another World Series, which would excite me very much, then we'd certainly do a double dip for that. We've got one out now, and but if you've seen a bunch of them, you'll probably see less going forward. So grab them when you can. They're a pretty cool little collector's item.
Can you repurpose the wax on a bottle?
You can. So we've worked on all kinds of like company internal things, ways that we can reuse the wax, to be environmentally responsible and just tap into our creativity. But you can also very carefully cut off the wax at home and repurpose it however you like. If you go through, I think what would be considered an average amount of Maker's Mark, maybe 10 or 12 bottles a week, then you could probably have enough to make a set of 4 coasters if you were to. I can't officially condone it, and I can't give you instructions, but it's certainly easy to melt it back down and repurpose it.
And then what's the best way to crack it, I guess, before you even open the bottle?
So there's a little pull tab that you want to find. Sometimes that's a little hard to get into. I'll use the foil blade on my wine key if I need to dig into the wax to get out of that pull tab, and it's a little bit of a challenge. And then the one thing that I didn't finish answering before, but I want to really quick, is the different expressions of Maker's Mark, what differentiates them. So we talked about classic Makers and 46. Maker's Mark cast strength is one of my favorites. And that's just uncut, unfiltered Maker's Mark right out of the barrel. So that's our most recent full-time line extension. That's you know, essentially it's trying to replicate or recreate the experience of drinking whiskey right out of the barrel. Like if you pull it out of a barrel thief to test the barrel when you're in a rick house and you just have all those smells, that whole atmospheric experience. We want to get as close to that as possible in a bottle. So Maker's Cask Strength is uncut, unfiltered. However that batch comes out proof-wise, it's usually around 110 proof, but it'll vary by a few proof points either way. So so that's one. And then you have a bottle of Maker's Private Select there. That's our single barrel program. I mentioned the Maker's 46 is finished with seared French oak staves in these barrels that we crack open, add in finishing staves, and then recooper and refill. So that's the same process we use for Private Select, but we have different flavor profiles, different finishing staves that add different you know, different flavor and aroma dimensions. So it's a Private Select barrel is a custom combination of those finishing staves. So it's a pretty cool program.
Okay, I think we've gotten through most of the questions. So Matt, guess what that means?
Time for another cocktail.
Yes.
Right on time.
So first of all, thank you, Greg, for like unparalleled knowledge. That was badass. And what we're gonna do now is bring it to our second cocktail, which is gonna be a Bloody Mary. Now, Bloody Marys are a favorite of a lot of people, and if they're not currently, it's gonna be a favorite of yours today, if I'm not mistaken. So what we're gonna do is gonna be a little bit different. We're gonna shake this Bloody Mary. So most times when you see a Bloody Mary built, it's like in the glass, and then it's stirred up with a straw, etc. This time we're gonna shake it, so it's gonna be a little bit different. So let's start out with our cheapest ingredients first. We're gonna do 1 lime wedge squeeze. If you have your shaker ready, squeeze it in, place it in there. Now we're going to do another lemon wedge. Squeeze, placed in. Now we're going to start with the fun stuff. We're going to take some tomato juice, 4 ounces. So what we're going to do here, put that right in the glass, 2 ounces, and here's the second one. We're also going to do 4 dashes of Worcestershire sauce. Now, I don't have Worcestershire sauce right next to me, so what I'm going to do also is put in some hot sauce. A couple dashes there. And then we're going to take 2 dashes of Angostura bitters.
Oh, I just did something.
Everybody has their own shape. Everybody's got their own style. So however you're feeling it, you put that energy, you put that love into the shake. Take that off. Get your glass, preferably a highball glass, but it doesn't matter either way. Fill it up with some ice. And then strain over that ice. So it's just that beautiful red consistency that we have there. Now, the best part about Bloody Marys, and what makes it a great COVID lockdown cocktail, is that you can garnish it with whatever you have, right? And what I have in my fridge today is an olive, lemon juice, little salami, and some cheese. Also, this kind of complements the cocktail in the sense that there's acid, there's salt, and there's sour from the cheese. So I'm going to put it into the Bloody Mary right on top, and I'm going to cheers you guys.
Cheers, Matt.
Absolutely, and we're gonna hit the bell.
Woohoo!
This is cocktail.
Nice.
I love that you shook the Bloody Mary. I've never made. I mean, I do love doing like brunch Bloody Marys, but I've never shaken it. We just sort of build your own, but that's like a great tip right there.
Yeah,
I love to shake the bloody a little bit.
It's good.
And we already, of course, we have. Oh, Sean said, "What about putting a whole fried chicken in the Bloody Mary?"
So maybe more like a Cornish hen, but I guess it depends on the size of your glass.
I love that idea. Belinda never had that combo before, so I'm glad she's loving that. That's awesome. Chris says that every time they use the shaker, the Boston shaker, I guess it's called, right? That the glass gets stuck. So how do you avoid that from sticking?
You can't necessarily avoid it because it's the pressure that comes from shaking a cocktail is going to make it stick. However, if you hit it with the palm of your hand, right at the spot where it seals, it will disengage it.
Softly, right? You don't want to do like some Bruce Lee kind of kung fu action, right?
No, yeah, if you Bruce Lee it, the glass is gonna break.
All right, we have a lot of mixers here. So I know Sarah and I want to spotlight some people. Who wants to volunteer first? Or we'll just go and find you. We're actually Carol and Chris, we're curious about you because we see Laura in your background. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Hi, Carol. Oh, wow, look at that. That looks festive.
We're social
Yeah.
distancing.
I love it. So obviously you're neighbors, it seems, right?
Yeah, we do the fire pit a lot.
I love it. This looks so great. And what area you guys live in? We'll be right over.
We're in Naperville.
Oh, that's like, I love our Naperville store. It's like the fun party store. Don't you guys think?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
The bar, when we can have it open, is always rocking. They always are so festive in that store.
Oh, yeah, Laura and I have gone to a few of the events.
We will, when Sarah and I can get back at it, obviously, and we all can gather, we'll make sure that we get to meet you.
Cool. Yeah. Look forward to it.
Those drinks look amazing. Good job. And I love your whole backyard scenario. It looks great. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. And then I know we have some other people mixing along. I know C. Seneca is probably at it. I got to find her. Sometimes this is hard, you guys, the Zoom board. Cheryl, I think, was mixing. She's taking a picture of her drink, maybe. Oh, there's C. Seneca. Welcome. That looks great. So tell us what you put in there. Just what Matt said. You don't have a whole chicken in there?
I don't have a whole chicken, just olives.
That's a great combo. I love
Just
that.
olives, yep.
How's your quarantine going? You're still having a fun time with your neighbors? And
I'm still having fun. I loved the Manhattans. That was the best Manhattan I've ever had because I've had some that I cannot drink.
I know Matt, it was a great, like the proportion. I know it's a classic recipe, but when you measure and like stir it the right way, I mean, it was great. I think you said like 15 spins. It's the perfect way.
About 15 normally is good. And also it always helps to have good ingredients too, which we're dealing with tonight.
Yeah, following up those classic simple cocktails with 2 or 3 or 4 ingredients, they're the easiest ones to execute, but they're also the easiest to mess up, right? It's there's such little margin for error. So it's if you get the measurements right and you hit that temperature dilution axis point just right, I think Manhattan, if it's perfectly stirred, has this really cool like insinuating cocoa note almost, and you lose it with just a few more revolutions.
Well, I think the other great tip that Matt taught us during the Hornitos class was I do tend to put ice in the shaker or in the whatever this is called. What is this called? Mixing cup immediately. And I think it dilutes it so much that you lose that balance. So I think, right. Thanks for that tip because I always ice and,
You always have to think about water as an ingredient in the cocktail. If you say like a daiquiri is rum, lime, and sugar, or a Manhattan is bourbon, sweet vermouth, and bitters, don't forget that water is the 4th ingredient. So if you have all those things and add a half a glass of water or whatever, it's going to become flabby and bland. If you get the water balance just right, then you cut the alcohol down just enough that you can taste all the different dimensions of flavor and not lose it. So I think that's the best way for me to think about it is like water is just an ingredient. I'm adding it with
right.
Yep.
All right, Cheryl, I'm coming back to you. I'm not forgetting you. How is your drink?
I'm unmuted now. Good. It's really, I am not a whiskey drinker. I am a tried and true vodka drinker, but this is fantastic.
So I'm talking about.
I know.
We got a convert, Maddie.
You might have convinced me that I could switch, honestly. So I think I did pretty good. I didn't have a whole lot of anything to put in but celery.
That's fine.
But-
Yeah, that's awesome.
It tastes fantastic, and thank you for the great lessons. That's a lot of information to absorb. You're very, very informational. I was a little less probably on the Manhattan. I did okay with it, and I drank it, but I didn't have the cool cherries. I just had the regular old red cherries.
That's fine too. Yeah.
It's all whatever. It's lockdown time. Whatever you have in the crib is what you.
Yeah, you're right. It's whatever I had, and this worked great. And I also had the cheap martini and Rossi vermouth. So
I love it. Yeah, I use
Nothing
that
wrong
one.
with that either.
hey, it worked out great. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheryl, if
Right,
you throw a
cheers.
grape
We
in
love
there,
having
then-
you.
Sorry.
We love having you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
This is awesome. All right, so we got all these burps. Erin says, congratulate. Go, Cheryl. Welcome to the Bourbon Club. I see Tim Callahan. Shout out, Mom. I don't know what that means, but I don't know where Tim is. Tim, are you the one who called me out the other day for the burgers? Wait, we have to unmute you. I think you're on mute. You have to unmute yourself, maybe.
Definitely on bacon.
Wait, hold on. Okay, wait, hold on. Sarah, are you doing it or am I doing it?
Tim, I'm feeling that bacon situation, man. That's a bold move.
It's looking delicious.
I know we can't get you.
It's
Okay,
definitely-
now I think you're off mute. Can you hear us? Can we hear you? No. Oh, there you go.
There we go. Now you can hear me.
Yay!
All right.
All
I
right.
had it on the wrong input. I've got my headphones plugged in too. I was saying shout out Mom because Cheryl's my mom.
Oh my
She's
God, I love
like,
this. See, now it's all this, after 2 months of doing this, it's all coming together. Who's neighbors? Who's related?
Exactly.
Yeah, this is great.
The bacon, salt, pepper, bacon.
Oh, man.
Perfect. I tried a whole chicken, but it wouldn't fit. Sitting back there.
Tim, I did a terrible job with the burgers the other night. They tasted good. They didn't look good, but I'll do a better job next time.
It was the onions. They kind of they messed with you a little bit. It looked like.
Yeah, I overdid them, and then I liked how Tony had like the cheese. Anyway, we're talking about another class, but yeah, the best thing to do is to follow directions. Like I followed Matt's recipe to the T, and I followed the wing recipe to the T, and it worked out perfectly. So.
Gotta listen. I'm not the greatest at that, but I'm learning.
Awesome. Well, thanks for making along. We love it. All right. Yeah, everyone says can't go wrong with bacon. Bacon and bourbon is a great combo. We ordered them online from Italy. This is awesome. You guys all are so into this. This is so fun. Greg, do you have anything else you want to add about the brand? I mean, I think we had pictures that we were going to share. Sarah, are we able to do that of the distillery? I know we had talked about it.
Well, while you guys work on that, I would love to talk a little bit more about Makers. We started to tell the story with Bill and Margie creating the brand in 1953.
Right.
We turned the stills on in 1954 and bottled the first batch in 59. So for the next 15 years or so after that, it was a tiny little Kentucky-only brand. We didn't call ourselves in those days a craft bourbon. It wasn't part of the verbiage, right? But we were in some ways the first real craft bourbon, and we've tried to really stay close and connected to those roots. In 1976, Bill Samuels Jr. took over the brand from his dad when he retired, and Bill Jr. was he's still around. He's turning 80 in about 3 weeks. And he's ostensibly retired, but he still shows up at the distillery a few days a week. But he wanted to be a rocket scientist. He told his parents when he was young he wasn't going to be the 7th generation Samuels distiller. He said, I want to work for NASA instead. So Bill Jr. went out to Cal Berkeley, studied aerospace engineering, He was a very talented student, but didn't necessarily follow the rules all the time. So he ran an unauthorized experiment, blew up a lab building, and was expelled. So kind of came home tail between his legs and said, I guess I'll be a bourbon maker after all. And his dad said, I'm not letting you anywhere near my distilling equipment. So said, figure something else out. He said, you have to prove yourself after that mess up. So Bill Jr. went to Vanderbilt instead, got a law degree, worked for a law firm in New York for a couple years, decided that life wasn't for him. But when he came home in 1969, he'd proven himself enough that his dad hired him. So his dad said, Bill, why don't you try to figure out how to market this brand a little bit? So it was essentially a hobby distillery. Bill Samuel Sr., when he sold the family distillery, made enough money that he could kind of do Maker's Mark as a passion project. He just wanted something he was proud to share with his friends, something that was disruptive and interesting, but he wasn't trying to build it into a huge commercial operation.
Hey,
Bill
Greg.
Jr.
Really quick, I just want to see if people can see my screen. I'm trying to share some pictures.
Yeah, that was a
I can
great
see your
idea.
screen.
Okay, I'm gonna just rotate through some pictures while Greg's speaking and everyone's listening. And this is what we were talking about earlier with the hand dipping and the custom label, the first screen. I will share these and I'll let you keep speaking. Sorry about that interruption.
No worries. Thanks, Aaron. And those ones, it looks like aren't even the custom labels. Those are just our standard labels from the print shop down at the distillery. Like I said, we hand cut, hand print all those on site and hand apply the labels. Well, not hand apply them exactly, but label them on site. So that's some Dale Chihuly glass work there.
I thought that was actually, I think, when you go to the distillery, it's very, I don't want to say old school, but we had gone to a few distilleries, but it's very more rustic, but I love the addition of some of that cool artwork. Like I love the stills and how, oh my God, look, yeah, I mean, this is beautiful. I'll let you keep going, Greg, sorry.
No worries at all. Yeah.
I loved it.
So it turned out that Bill Samuels Jr. and Dale Chihuly were part of a kind of unspoken mutual admiration society. Chihuly really liked Maker's Mark, and Bill Jr. really liked Chihuly's work. And when they figured out that they were fans of each other's, they kind of partnered up on some fun projects. So we have some permanent installations, and we had some temporary long-term exhibits that were up for a few months or a year or more. Anyhow, so Bill Samuels Jr., when he came back in 1969, started working for his parents. He essentially just loaded his car up with bottles of Maker's Mark and started driving around the country, getting potential distributors and high-profile bartenders and whatever else to taste the product, trying to get the message out to consumers and really just build the brand identity and get our message out there. At that time, Maker's was something you could only buy in Kentucky. It was, for Bill and Margie, it was essentially a hobby. So Bill Jr. took over the brand in 1976 when his dad retired and just gradually, methodically built Maker's Mark into first a major regional brand and then a national brand. He pioneered a lot of really amazing marketing projects, some advertising campaigns that are taught in college classrooms. And built it from this tiny little hobby operation into a commercial juggernaut. When he was getting ready to retire, this is about 11 years ago, I'll tell one Bill Jr. story because I think it kind of captures the essence of the man. He's prone to hyperbole, extremely charismatic, strangely flashy dresser. You can't really trust him farther than you can throw him, but he's incredibly entertaining. But he called the whole distillery leadership team into his office one morning. Everybody knew he was getting ready to retire, and so he called everybody together and said, "I brought you all here because I had a dream last night, and I woke up profoundly disconcerted." And everybody's kind of looking around like, what is Bill talking about now? And he said, I was at a funeral. And, everybody was gathered around mourners wearing black, and they were standing around a grave. There's a pastor giving a little talk, and, and then the mourners start filing past me, and they don't seem to see me. They're kind of walking through me. And I just stood there watching as they lowered the casket into the grave, and I read the headstone behind it. And everybody's 21 plus, right? I'm just going to tell the story verbatim. I apologize for my French in advance here. But he said, I read the headstone and it said, Bill Samuels Jr., at least he didn't fuck it up. And so Bill said, I woke up in a cold sweat and realized all I've done is kind of take care of Maker's Mark. I'm the first Samuel since the mid 1800s who hasn't made a whiskey in my life. I've just kind of managed the commercial operation. So he said, I want to make my perfect version of Maker's Mark. I want to take the things about my parents' whiskey that I love and really find a way to elevate those and amplify them. So that was the project that culminated with the release of Maker's 46. So Bill worked on all kinds of wood finishing experiments, secondary barrels, all these different processes. And what we landed on is this French oak finishing method that became Maker's 46. So Bill retired 10 years ago. And his son, Rob Samuels, took over the day-to-day operations. So Rob is the third generation manager of operations for the distillery. If you ever see about a 6'3" redhead walking around, he's very friendly. Feel free to say hello. I think it's just an amazing distillery. For me personally, I've worked in, like Amanda said, we're old friends. I've worked in pretty much every area of the industry you can imagine. I've run beverage programs in Chicago and bartended everywhere and worked for different brands now. And Maker's Mark is so unique because there's this genuine family atmosphere. We're part of Beam Suntory. We're part of this big, global conglomerate. You can find us in 140 something countries, but it feels like working for a medium-sized family business day to day because I've texted with Rob Samuels and with Bill Samuels Jr. I've sat down and just had a cocktail with those guys, and I'm not like one of the major people in the brand. I'm just part of the advocacy team that gets to share Maker's Mark with the world, share it with all of you guys. But I don't make the big decisions. But I feel so connected, so intimately connected with the family that's been making Maker's Mark since day one. So that's just an awesome thing that we're kind of siloed off, and we get to be part of this this incredible history and heritage So that's what I'd say about Maker's Mark, Amanda.
Well, I agree with everything you said. It's a must go to. I mean, I really, I feel like I put my trip off to the Bourbon Trail for so long, and the highlight of the trip was Maker's. It was beautiful. I'm actually, tonight I'm going to post pictures on my Instagram of our trips because it was just going and seeing the stills and the production. It was truly amazing. So we're very thankful to you, Matt, and Greg and Aaron and the team for being here from Maker's tonight. I mean, this is, obviously a very special place, and this was a special class. And I always am intimidated by making things like Manhattans and old fashions, but Matt, you gave me confidence. This is really delicious. So thank you.
Well, absolutely, and thank you for the opportunity to have me and to have Greg, and just to have the opportunity to give someone confidence with a cocktail recipe. That feels good, and that's great. That's what we want to do.
Well, that's why you worked so hard to become a master mixologist.
Great job to the both of you. Thank you.
Great job, guys.
Awesome. Thank you. If you have any more questions about the brand, you can email Sarah and I. I think you have our info and we can find out for you. Post your pictures. We love to see them. We're at Mariano's Market, so you can post pictures and tag us and we'll repost. And guys, what's Maker's? Is it at Maker's Mark or is there a
what's that? Oh yeah,
Instagram for Maker's.
At Maker's Mark is great.
Perfect. All right, that's easy. Everyone, thank you. We will see you next. Well, we have live music tomorrow night for those of you that tune in to our Live at Mariano's on our Facebook. We have new kids events this Saturday besides Miss Jamie for those of you that have younger kids. And for older kids, we have art classes now on Saturdays. So there's that for Saturday. And then we start next week with a whole new round of classes. We're going to be cutting back a little bit in June as some of the restrictions are lifting. But if you have any requests for classes or ideas, you can get hold of Sarah and we'll send out all the info on tonight. And everyone have a great rest of your night. Enjoy your Manhattans. Chicago meets Manhattan.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks to all of our
Thank you all
regulars.
for having
Thank you,
us.
Susie. Thank you. We'll see you later. Bye, everybody.